The ink on the divorce papers was practically dry. Harrison Sterling, the tech mogul worth $4 billion, was checking his Rolex, already thinking about the victory party with his mistress. Across the aisle, Audrey, his waitress wife, sat silently in a dress she'd worn for 3 years. Everyone in the courtroom, the expensive lawyers, the press, even the judge, thought this was a slaughter. They thought she was walking away with nothing. But just as Judge Reynolds raised his pen to finalize the decree, Audrey didn't scream or cry. She simply reached into her tote bag and pulled out a crumpled, coffee-stained napkin inside a plastic sleeve. She looked the billionaire dead in the eye and said, "You forgot you signed this." What happened next didn't just silence the room. It froze Harrison Sterling's blood cold. The air conditioning in the Superior Court of Los Angeles hummed with a low mechanical drone, the only sound in a room thick with tension. To an outsider, this looked less like a divorce hearing and more like a corporate execution. On the right side of the aisle sat Harrison Sterling. At 42, Harrison was the face of Sterling AI, a man whose face had graced the cover of Forbes and Time more often than most people had visited the dentist. He sat with the relaxed posture of a predator who had already eaten. He wore a bespoke navy suit from Savile Row that cost more than the average American car, and he was currently scrolling through emails on a prototype phone his company hadn't even released yet. Surrounding him was a phalanx of legal sharks, the team from Blackwood and Associates. Jonathan Blackwood, a lawyer so expensive he didn't charge by the hour but by the minute, stood at the podium. He was smoothing out his tie, looking bored. On the left side sat Audrey Jenkins. There were no associates around her, no paralegals whispering strategy. Just Audrey. She was 34, but looked older today. The stress of the last 6 months etched into the fine lines around her eyes. She wore a simple grey dress, the fabric slightly worn at the elbows. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, her knuckles white. She looked small, defeated. "Your Honor," Jonathan Blackwood droned, his voice dripping with false politeness. "My client has been exceedingly patient. We have established that the prenuptial agreement signed 5 years ago is ironclad. Ms. Jenkins waived her right to spousal support, waived her claim to the Sterling estate, and waived any interest in future earnings. The terms were clear. Upon dissolution of the marriage, she leaves with what she came in with." Judge Arthur P. Reynolds, a man with bushy grey eyebrows and a reputation for hating time-wasters, looked over his spectacles. "And she came in with debt, Your Honor." Blackwood smirked. "And a 2014 Honda Civic, which Mr. Sterling has graciously agreed to let her keep." A few stifled chuckles rippled through the gallery where the press had gathered. It was cruel. It was humiliating. Harrison didn't even look up from his phone. To him, Audrey was already a memory. She was a glitch in his operating system that he was currently patching out. He was already thinking about Vivian, who was waiting for him at the Ritz-Carlton with a bottle of Dom Perignon on ice. "Ms. Jenkins," Judge Reynolds boomed, shifting his gaze to the lonely figure on the left. "You have no legal representation today." Audrey cleared her throat. Her voice was quiet, trembling slightly. "No, Your Honor. I couldn't afford Mr. Blackwood's rates, and Harrison froze our joint accounts." "The accounts were frozen to prevent dissipation of assets," Blackwood interjected smoothly. "Right." The judge sighed, clearly wanting to get to his lunch break. "Ms. Jenkins, I've reviewed the filings. The prenuptial agreement you signed is standard. It is brutal, I will admit, but it is legal. You signed it in the presence of a notary. You had the opportunity to seek counsel, and you declined. Do you dispute this?" Audrey looked down at the table. I signed it. Yes. Then I see no reason to delay, the judge said, uncapping his fountain pen. The scratching sound of the cap coming off echoed like a gunshot. Mr. Sterling is a man of significant influence, and the court appreciates that his time is valuable. This marriage is dissolved. The petition is granted as requested by the petitioner. Harrison finally looked up. He flashed a dazzling, camera-ready smile at the judge. Thank you, Your Honor. Justice is swift. He stood up, buttoning his jacket. Blackwood began gathering his papers, already laughing about a golf game scheduled for the weekend. The bailiff moved to open the side door. Wait. The word was soft, but it cut through the noise of the shuffling papers. Judge Reynolds paused the tip of his pen, hovering millimeters above the signature line. He looked up, annoyed. Excuse me. Audrey Jenkins stood up. She didn't look small anymore. She reached down into a worn-out canvas tote bag that sat by her feet. The divorce isn't finalized until you sign correct, Your Honor. Audrey asked, her voice gaining a sudden, terrifying steadiness. That is technically correct, Reynolds said, frowning. Do you have a statement to make? Because unless it's a legal objection, I am done here. I have an objection, Audrey said. Mr. Blackwood mentioned the prenuptial agreement I signed to protect Harrison's assets, but he neglected to mention the other agreement. Harrison stopped buttoning his jacket. He turned his head slowly, his brow furrowing. What is she talking about? He whispered to Blackwood. She's stalling? Blackwood whispered back, though he looked confused. There is no other agreement. Your Honor. Audrey continued, walking slowly toward the bench. 5 years ago, Harrison made me sign a document that ensured I would never touch his money. He told me it was because he needed to know I loved him. For him, not his bank account. I respected that. She reached the bench. The bailiff stepped forward to intercept her, but the judge waved him off. But, Audrey said, pulling a clear plastic file out of her bag. Inside was a piece of paper that looked like it had been ripped from a spiral notebook stained with a brown ring of coffee. Harrison is a betting man, and on the night before our wedding he was feeling very confident. He signed this. Audrey slid the plastic sleeve across the mahogany surface. Judge Reynolds picked it up. He adjusted his glasses. He read the first line, then the second. His eyes went wide. He looked from the paper to Harrison, then back to the paper. Mr. Blackwood, the judge said, his voice dropping an octave. Did your client disclose the existence of the diner addendum? The what? Blackwood asked, his smugness evaporating. Let me see that, Harrison barked, losing his composure. He strode forward, ignoring courtroom protocol. Sit down, Mr. Sterling, the judge roared, slamming his gavel. Miss Jenkins, is this signature authentic? It is, Audrey said calmly. And there are 3 witnesses, one of whom is the notary who signed the original prenup. He was having coffee at the next table. Harrison's face went from tan to a pale, sickly grey. He stared at the piece of paper in the judge's hand. He remembered. The memory hit him like a freight train. The night at Joe's diner. The rain, the laughter, the arrogance. Oh, God, Harrison whispered. Audrey smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who had just sprung the trap. To understand why a billionaire was currently hyperventilating in a Los Angeles courtroom, we have to go back 5 years. We have to go back to the smell of grease-burnt coffee and cheap maple syrup. We have to go back to Joe's diner in downtown Seattle. Audrey wasn't a socialite back then. She wasn't wearing designer clothes or attending galas. She was 29, working double shifts to pay off her father's medical bills. She wore a pink uniform with a name tag that was slightly crooked, and her hair was always tied back in a messy bun. It was a Tuesday night, raining as it only can in Seattle, relentless and grey. The diner was empty except for one booth in the back. Harrison Sterling had walked in, looking like a wet dog. He wasn't the polished tycoon back then. Well, he was. But that night he was in disguise. He was wearing a hoodie and jeans, trying to escape the paparazzi after a disastrous product launch that had tanked his stock by 15% in a single day. He just wanted coffee when nobody knew his name. "Rough night?" Audrey had asked, pouring him a mug of the house blend, which was notoriously terrible. Harrison looked up, ready to snap at her. He was used to people wanting something. Money, a job, a selfie. But Audrey just looked tired and kind. "You could say that," Harrison grumbled. "I lost $100 million today." Audrey didn't gasp. She didn't Google him. She just laughed. A genuine, throaty laugh. "Honey, I dropped a tray of pancakes earlier and lost $4 in tips. I think I know how you feel." Harrison stared at her. For the first time in years, someone wasn't impressed by him. It was intoxicating. They talked for 3 hours. He told her about the pressure of his board of directors, disguised as "my boss is a jerk." She told him about her dad's nursing home and her dream of opening a bakery. By the time he left, Harrison Sterling was infatuated. Not in love. Harrison was too narcissistically damaged for real love, but he was obsessed. He saw Audrey as something pure, something he could acquire to make himself feel human again. The courtship was a whirlwind. It was the kind of thing you see in movies, but faster. 2 weeks later, he revealed who he was. He picked her up in a helicopter. He paid off her father's medical bills anonymously, which he later made sure she knew about. He dazzled her. For Audrey, who had struggled for every dime she ever had, Harrison felt like a savior. He was charming, protective, and seemingly devoted. But his friends, the sharks, the socialites, the people like Jonathan Blackwood, they hated her. "She's a gold digger, Harry." His mother, a fierce matriarch named Victoria Sterling, had warned him over tea at the Kensington estate. "She sees the zeros in your bank account, not the man. You need to protect the empire." Harrison laughed it off, but the seed of doubt was planted. He was a man of business, after all. He understood risk management. 6 months later, they were engaged. The wedding was set for a private island in the Maldives. It was going to be the event of the decade. 3 days before the flight, Harrison walked into the small apartment Audrey still kept. He was holding a thick leather folder. "Audrey, baby." He started using that smooth voice he used to close deals. "My lawyers, the board, they're breathing down my neck. They want us to sign some paperwork, just formalities." He laid the prenuptial agreement on the table. It wasn't just a prenup. It was a manifesto of greed. It stated that in the event of a divorce, Audrey got nothing. No alimony, no property. Even gifts given during the marriage were to be returned. Audrey read it, her hands shaking. "Harrison, this says if you cheat on me and we divorce, I still get nothing. It says I don't even own my own name if it's attached to yours. It's just legalese, Audrey," Harrison said, stroking her hair. "I'll never leave you. I'll never cheat. This is just to shut up the old men in the boardroom. If you love me, if you really love me and not the money, you'll sign it." It was a test, a cruel, manipulative test. Audrey looked at him. She loved him, or she thought she did. She picked up the pen and signed. "There," she whispered. "I signed it. Are you happy?" Harrison beamed. He had won. He had the trophy wife, and he had kept his fortune safe. He felt invincible. The night before the wedding, they were back in Seattle for a final fitting. They ended up at Joe's diner for nostalgia's sake. Harrison was drunk on champagne and hubris. He was laughing, bragging to the confused cook about how smart he was. "You know, babe," Harrison slurred, waving a French fry, "you're the only one who didn't want the money. Everyone else, vultures. But you signed. You actually signed the death warrant on your own financial future. That's why I'm marrying you." Audrey was sipping a milkshake. She looked at him, realizing for the first time that his protection was actually just arrogance. "You think I'm stupid, don't you, Harrison?" she asked quietly. "Not stupid." He laughed. "Just naive. Innocent." "If I'm so innocent," Audrey said, grabbing a napkin and a pen from her purse, "then you shouldn't have a problem signing something for me." Harrison laughed. "Anything I'll sign your menu, I'll sign your forehead." "No," Audrey said. She wrote quickly on the napkin. The ink bled slightly into the cheap paper. "Since I signed your agreement to prove I don't care about your money, you sign this to prove that your money doesn't control you." She slid the napkin to him. Harrison squinted at the scribbled writing. He was laughing so hard he could barely read. "The diner addendum cute. Very cute." "Read it, Harrison," she said. "I don't need to read it." He pulled a gold fountain pen from his jacket. "I'm Harrison Sterling. I do what I want." He scrawled his signature across the bottom of the napkin, big and bold. He even added a smiley face. "Witnessed!" shouted the notary. A man named Mr. Henderson, who Harrison had dragged along all week to handle logistics, who was sitting in the next booth eating a burger. "Witnessed!" Harrison yelled back. Audrey took the napkin. She didn't smile. She folded it carefully, placed it in a plastic sleeve she used for her recipes, and put it in her bag. Harrison forgot about the napkin 10 minutes later. He forgot about it for 5 years. But back in the courtroom, as Judge Reynolds stared at that coffee-stained paper, Harrison wished he had forgotten how to write his own name. Judge Reynolds looked up, his face pale. He read the handwritten text aloud for the court record. "I, Harrison Sterling, being of sound mind and body, hereby agree that this document supersedes all previous financial agreements. In the event that I, Harrison Sterling, am the one to file for divorce, or if I am found to be unfaithful, the prenuptial agreement of August 24th is null and void. Furthermore, should these conditions be met, Audrey Jenkins shall be entitled to—" The judge paused. He choked a little. "She shall be entitled to 50% of my controlling stake in Sterling Industries and full ownership of the Kensington estate." The silence in the courtroom was shattered by the sound of Jonathan Blackwood dropping his briefcase. The silence that followed the reading of the diner addendum wasn't empty. It was heavy. It pressed down on the courtroom like a physical weight. Jonathan Blackwood was the first to move. The high-priced lawyer, who had been checking his watch 3 minutes ago, lunged toward the bench with a desperation that was entirely undignified. "Objection!" Blackwood shouted, his voice cracking. "Your Honor, this is ambush litigation. This is a piece of trash, a napkin. We cannot seriously be entertaining this as a legal document." Judge Reynolds held the plastic sleeve up to the light. He wasn't looking at Blackwood. He was looking at the ink. He was looking at the specific jagged slant of the H in Harrison's signature. "Mr. Blackwood," the judge said, his voice dangerously low. "In the state of California, a contract requires an offer acceptance and consideration. It does not require parchment paper or a wax seal. If the signature is valid, the contract is valid." "He was drunk," Blackwood spat out, pointing a trembling finger at his own client. "Look at the handwriting. It's sloppy." Mr. Sterling was clearly intoxicated and lacked the capacity to contract. This was a joke, a romantic gesture made in jest. Harrison nodded vigorously, sweat beginning to bead on his forehead, ruining the matte finish of his makeup. Yes, Your Honor. We were at a diner. I was humoring her. It was a role play." Audrey stood up again. She didn't shout. She didn't point. She simply turned her head toward Harrison. Her eyes were dry, but they burned with a cold, hard intensity that made Harrison flinch. "You weren't drunk, Harrison," Audrey said. Her voice carried to the back of the room. "You had a milkshake, vanilla, and you drove us home in the Aston Martin afterward. Are you admitting to the court that you drove under the influence?" Harrison's mouth opened, then closed. It was a trap. If he admitted he was drunk enough to void the contract, he was admitting to a DUI on court record, which would trigger a morals clause in his CEO contract with Sterling AI. Audrey knew it. She had read his CEO contract too. Harrison stammered. "I might have had a drink earlier." "Furthermore," Audrey continued, turning back to the judge, "Mr. Blackwood claims Harrison lacked the capacity to do business that night. But if I recall, at 11:45 p.m. that same evening, 20 minutes after signing this napkin, Harrison sent an email authorizing the acquisition of the Kylos startup for $12 million. I have the time-stamped email here." She pulled another piece of paper from her tote bag. "If he was too drunk to sign a napkin for his wife," Audrey said, placing the email on the judge's bench, "then surely the Kylos acquisition is also void, and the investors should know that Sterling AI is managed by a man who spends millions while incapacitated." The room went deadly silent. Jonathan Blackwood looked at Audrey as if she had just pulled a grenade pin with her teeth. She wasn't just fighting a divorce. She was holding a match over Harrison's entire corporate reputation. "He was sober," Blackwood whispered, defeated. "He knew when he was beaten on a point." He turned to Harrison, his eyes furious. "Shut up! Do not say another word." Judge Reynolds looked at the email, then back at the napkin. "The court recognizes the timestamp. Mr. Sterling appears to have been conducting high-level business affairs concurrently with the signing of this addendum. The argument of incapacity is overruled." Harrison slammed his fist onto the table. "This is insane. It's a napkin. I didn't mean it. Intent is judged by the signature, Mr. Sterling," Reynolds said, peering over his glasses. "However, given the unorthodox nature of the document and the immense value of the assets involved controlling interest in a multi-billion-dollar company, I cannot rule on this immediately." The judge leaned back. "I am ordering a forensic handwriting analysis to authenticate the ink age and the signature. We will reconvene in 72 hours. Until then, all assets of the Sterling estate are frozen. No transfers, no sales. And certainly," the judge glared at Harrison, "no parties." "Frozen," Harrison choked. "I have a liquidity call on Friday. Better find some cash in the sofa cushions, Mr. Sterling. Court is adjourned." The gavel banged. As the room dissolved into chaos, reporters shouting questions, bailiffs moving in. Harrison stood up. He didn't look at his lawyer. He walked straight toward Audrey. He stopped inches from her face. He smelled of expensive cologne and fear. "You think you're clever," he hissed, his voice a low rumble, so only she could hear. "You think a piece of paper is going to take my company? I built that. Me. Not you." Audrey didn't back down. She looked at the man she had once adored, the man who had promised to protect her, and saw nothing but a frightened child in a suit. "You built it, Harrison," she whispered back. But you bet it. You bet it because you were so sure I was a nobody. You were so sure I was stupid." "I will bury you," Harrison snarled. "I have lawyers who can turn day into night. By the time we come back here on Friday, you'll wish you had taken the Honda Civic and left." "I don't want the money, Harrison," Audrey said, picking up her tote bag. "I never did. I just want you to feel what it's like to be powerless." She turned and walked away past the stunned reporters, past the flashing cameras, and out into the bright, blinding Los Angeles sun. She had won the battle, but she knew the war had just begun. The interior of Harrison Sterling's limousine was usually a place of celebration. It was stocked with crystal decanters of scotch and featured lighting designed to make everyone look successful. Today, it felt like a hearse. Harrison sat in the back, loosening his tie until it hung like a noose around his neck. Jonathan Blackwood sat opposite him furiously, typing on a laptop, his face illuminated by the harsh blue light of the screen. "Stop typing!" Harrison screamed, grabbing a crystal glass and hurling it at the minibar. It shattered, raining shards of glass over the leather seats. "Fix this, Jonathan. That's what I pay you $50,000 a month for. Fix it." Blackwood didn't flinch. He stopped typing and looked up slowly. "You pay me to handle legal matters, Harrison. You don't pay me to perform miracles on napkins you signed because you were feeling arrogant." "It's a forgery," Harrison insisted, though his eyes darted around nervously. "She traced it." "The forensic team will know that in 10 minutes, Blackwood said coldly, "and if they find out we lied about a forgery, the judge will hand her the keys to the kingdom by default. No, we have to attack the witnesses." Harrison froze. "Witnesses? She said there were 3, Blackwood said, consulting his notes. "One was the notary, Henderson, the guy who notarized the original prenup." Henderson. Harrison rubbed his temples. He remembered Henderson, a small, balding man who smelled like peppermint. Harrison had treated him like furniture during the wedding prep. "Henderson is a nobody. He's a pencil pusher." "He's a pencil pusher who saw you sign away half your company," Blackwood said. "If he testifies that you were sober and that you signed it willingly, you are done. The Diner addendum triggers if you file for divorce, which you did, or if you were unfaithful." Harrison went pale. "About that," Harrison started. Blackwood closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Don't tell me. Please don't tell me." "Vivian," Harrison whispered. "My associate." "The mistress," Blackwood corrected. "She's at the Ritz. She posted a photo on Instagram an hour ago. Tagged me." Blackwood looked like he wanted to open the moving car door and roll out into traffic. "You idiot. If Audrey proves adultery, the napkin is valid on 2 counts. We need to scrub the internet. I'll have my tech team kill the post. But we need to deal with Henderson." "I can pay him," Harrison said quickly. "Everyone has a price. Give him $1 million. $2 million. Tell him he didn't see anything. Tell him he was in the bathroom when I signed it. I can't bribe a witness, Harrison. That's a felony. I will be disbarred." Blackwood paused. He looked out the window at the passing skyscrapers. His expression darkened. "But I can hire an independent investigator to interview him, to remind him of the penalties of perjury, to make sure his memory is correct." Harrison nodded, a cruel smile returning to his face. "Do it. Get Gareth. He's the one we used for the union busting last year. He scares people just by standing there." "I'll make the call," Blackwood said. "But Harrison, if Audrey has the original napkin, we are vulnerable. Where is she staying?" "She's at a Motel 6 in Santa Monica," Harrison sneered. She has no security, no guards. Maybe she needs a visit too, Blackwood murmured, just to negotiate. Meanwhile, across the city, Audrey sat on the edge of a lumpy mattress in a room that smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon polish. The contrast between her reality and Harrison's limo couldn't have been starker. She wasn't celebrating. She was trembling. Her hands shook as she held her phone. She knew Harrison. She knew that when you cornered a narcissist, they didn't surrender. They attacked. She dialed a number she had saved 5 years ago. It rang 4 times. "Hello," a nervous, reedy voice answered. "Mr. Henderson?" Audrey asked softly. "It's Audrey Jenkins. Or Sterling." There was a long silence on the other end. "Ms. Audrey, I saw the news. It's all over Twitter. The $1 billion napkin. I'm sorry to drag you into this, Mr. Henderson," Audrey said, "but I need to know. Are you safe?" "Safe?" The notary laughed nervously. "Why wouldn't I be safe? Harrison is going to come for you," Audrey said, her voice urgent. "He's going to try to buy you or scare you. He needs you to say the signature is fake, or that I forced him to sign it." I can't lie, Ms. Audrey," Henderson stammered. "I'm a notary public. My bond. My reputation. Harrison doesn't care about your reputation," Audrey snapped, then softened her tone. "Listen to me. Do not open your door to anyone you don't know, especially a man named Gareth. Big scar on his neck. If Harrison's lawyers call, tell them you'll only speak in court. You're scaring me, Ms. Audrey." "You should be scared," she said. "Harrison stands to lose $2 billion. People have been killed for less." There was a knock on Audrey's motel door. Audrey froze. She gripped the phone tighter. "Mr. Henderson, I have to go," she whispered. "Hide, please." She hung up. The knock came again, louder. 3 hard raps. Audrey looked at the tote bag on the bed. The napkin wasn't in there anymore. She wasn't that stupid. She had mailed the original to a P.O. box in Nevada, an hour after court keeping only a high-resolution photocopy on her. She walked to the door. She didn't chain it. She looked through the peephole. It wasn't Gareth. It wasn't Harrison. It was a woman. Tall, wearing enormous sunglasses and a trench coat that cost more than the motel itself. She had platinum blonde hair and red lipstick. Audrey frowned. She unlocked the door and opened it a crack. "Can I help you?" The woman pushed her sunglasses down her nose. Her eyes were rimmed with red, as if she had been crying, but her expression was fierce. "You're Audrey," the woman said. "I am." "Can I come in? We have a mutual problem." "Who are you?" Audrey asked, ready to slam the door. The woman sighed, looking around the dirty walkway of the motel with disgust. "My name is Vivian. I'm the reason Harrison filed for divorce, and I think he's about to throw me under the bus to save his company." Audrey's eyes widened. This was the mistress, the woman Harrison had left her for. "Why would I talk to you?" Audrey asked coldly. "Because," Vivian said, pulling a flash drive out of her Gucci purse, "I have the security footage from the Ritz-Carlton, and I have recordings of his calls from today. Harrison isn't just trying to invalidate the napkin, Audrey. He's planning to frame you for extortion." Audrey stared at the woman. "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." "Come in," Audrey said, stepping back. As the door clicked shut, the balance of power shifted again. Harrison Sterling thought he was fighting a waitress. He had no idea he was about to fight a war on 2 fronts. The neon sign outside the Motel 6 flickered with a buzzing sound, casting an intermittent sickly red glow into room 104. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating. Audrey sat at the small, wobbly table, her hands wrapped around a cup of lukewarm vending machine coffee. Across from her, sitting on the edge of the bed, as if she were afraid of catching a disease from the duvet, was Vivian. Vivian looked different up close. In the tabloids, she was a two-dimensional villain, the home wrecker, the swimsuit model, the trophy. But here, under the harsh fluorescent lights, the cracks in the porcelain were visible. Her mascara was slightly smudged. Her hands, manicured to perfection, were trembling. "Why?" Audrey asked. The single word hung in the air. Vivian took a deep breath, her chest rising sharply. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a slim silver flash drive. She placed it on the table between them. It looked harmless, like something you'd use to store family photos. "Because he recorded me," Vivian said, her voice brittle. "I was in the bathroom at the Ritz. I heard him on the phone with Blackwood. He wasn't just talking about the napkin, Audrey. He was talking about us. Us. He called me a depreciating asset." Vivian spat the words out, bitterness coating her tongue. "He told Blackwood that once the divorce was finalized, he needed to liquidate me, that I knew too much about his offshore accounts in the Caymans. He wasn't planning to marry me, Audrey. He was planning to pay me off and ship me back to Miami. And if I didn't go quietly," she pointed to the flash drive. "He has photos, private photos. He threatened to leak them." Audrey stared at the woman who had helped destroy her marriage. A part of her wanted to laugh. A part of her wanted to scream, "You deserve it." But looking at Vivian's terrified eyes, Audrey only felt a profound, exhausting sadness. Harrison didn't love people. He consumed them. "So you want revenge," Audrey said flatly. "I want protection," Vivian corrected. "And yes, I want to see him burn. On this drive is a recording I made 10 minutes after he hung up. I confronted him. I got him to admit what he's planning for you." Audrey plugged the drive into her old, battered laptop. She clicked the file named H Confession, MP3. The audio was grainy, recorded from a phone inside a pocket, but Harrison's voice was unmistakable. It was the voice of a man who believed he was God. "Look, Vivian, don't be dramatic. Audrey is a problem and problems get solved. I've already had Gareth transfer $50,000 into her father's nursing home account from a shell company. Tomorrow we report it as extortion. We say she demanded the money in exchange for keeping quiet about some fabricated abuse. The napkin becomes irrelevant if she's a felon." The recording ended. Audrey felt the blood drain from her face. Her hands went cold. He's going to frame me. He's going to send me to prison." "He's terrified, Audrey," Vivian said, leaning forward. "That napkin isn't just about the money. It's about his ego. If the world finds out, he gave away half his empire on a dare because he was arrogant. He's finished. Wall Street will eat him alive. He'd rather see you in jail than admit he made a mistake." Audrey stood up, pacing the small room. The walls felt like they were closing in. "I have the truth. I have the napkin." "The truth doesn't matter when you're fighting $4 billion, Vivian said ruthlessly. "He has the media. He has the judges. He has Gareth." "Who is Gareth?" "Gareth Stone." Vivian whispered the name like a curse. "He's Harrison's fixer, ex-military, private security. He doesn't file legal briefs, Audrey. He breaks things. And right now, I bet he's on his way to visit your witness." Audrey froze. "Mr. Henderson." "The notary," Vivian nodded. "If Gareth gets to him, Henderson will recant. He'll say you forged the signature. He'll say you held a gun to Harrison's head. He'll say whatever keeps his knees intact. Audrey grabbed her phone. She dialed Henderson's number again. Ring, ring, ring. "Pick up," she whispered. "Please pick up." The call went to voicemail. "It's too late," Vivian said, her voice devoid of hope. "We need to get to the courthouse. We need to file that recording before Gareth destroys the credibility of your witness." "No," Audrey said, a sudden clarity washing over her. She remembered the night at the diner. She remembered the smell of rain and grease. "Harrison thinks there are only 3 people who know the truth. Me, him, and the notary." "Who else is there?" Vivian asked. Audrey turned to Vivian, her eyes sharp. "The napkin. I told the judge there were 3 witnesses. The notary was 1. I was the 2nd. "And the 3rd, the cook," Audrey said. "Big Mike, the guy who made the milkshake Harrison was drinking. He came out to the table to bring extra cherries. He saw Harrison sign it. Harrison even joked with him. He said, 'Mike, look at this. I'm signing my life away.'" "Do you know where this Mike is?" Vivian asked skeptically. "Joe's Diner closed down 3 years ago. It's a Starbucks now." "I don't know where he is," Audrey said, grabbing her coat. "But Harrison doesn't know he exists. Harrison is so focused on the notary, he's forgotten about the little people. He never looks at the staff, Vivian. He didn't look at me until I spilled coffee on him, and he certainly didn't look at the fry cook." Audrey opened the door to the rainy night. "We have 48 hours to find a fry cook in a city of 4 million people," Audrey said. "Are you driving or am I?" Vivian stood up, adjusting her trench coat. For the first time, a small, genuine smile played on her lips. "We'll take my car," Vivian said. "It's faster, and it's paid for with his credit card." While Audrey and Vivian sped into the night in a Porsche 911, a very different scene was unfolding in the quiet suburbs of Pasadena. Arthur Henderson, the notary public, was a man of routine. He liked his tea at 9:00 p.m., his news at 10:00 p.m., and his bed by 10:30 p.m. He was a man who lived within the lines. Tonight, the lines were being erased. He sat in his favorite armchair, his hands shaking so violently that his tea had spilled all over his lap. Standing in front of him, blocking the view of the television, was a mountain of a man. Gareth Stone didn't look like a thug. He wore a crisp beige suit and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like an accountant or perhaps a librarian. But his eyes were dead. They were flat, shark-like voids that promised violence without emotion. "Mr. Henderson," Gareth said, his voice soft, almost soothing. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. My client, Mr. Sterling, is very concerned about your memory." I told the truth," Henderson stammered, clutching a throw pillow to his chest. "I saw him sign it. It was 5 years ago, at the diner." Gareth sighed as if disappointed. He walked over to the mantelpiece and picked up a framed photo of Henderson's daughter. She was in a graduation cap and gown. "Lovely girl," Gareth said. "Stanford Wright, expensive tuition, very expensive." "Leave her out of this," Henderson whimpered. "We've been looking into your finances, Arthur." Gareth continued, wiping a speck of dust from the photo frame. "It seems there was a discrepancy in your tax filings from 2019. An undeclared consulting fee, small, but enough for the IRS to audit you. And your wife's bakery. Surely it meets all the health codes. It would be a shame if the city inspectors found a rat infestation tomorrow morning." Henderson couldn't breathe. His small, carefully constructed life was being dismantled, sentence by sentence. "What do you want?" Henderson whispered. "We want the truth," Gareth said, placing the photo back down, face down. "The real truth, which is that you weren't at the table. You were in the bathroom. You came back, saw a napkin, and Mr. Sterling, who was visibly intoxicated, joked about it. You didn't notarize it in any official capacity. It was a prank. And Audrey Jenkins pressured him." Gareth reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a typed affidavit. He also pulled out a check. The amount on the check was $500,000. "This is for your trouble," Gareth said, placing both on the coffee table. "Consulting fees for your time." "And if I don't sign," Gareth smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Then the audit starts Monday. The health inspector comes Tuesday. And perhaps your daughter finds out that her tuition money came from her father's creative accounting." Henderson looked at the check. He looked at the affidavit. He looked at the phone on the table, thinking of calling Audrey. But he was a weak man. He had always been a weak man. That was why Harrison had hired him in the first place. With a trembling hand, Henderson picked up the pen. 2 hours later, Audrey and Vivian were sitting in the back of an all-night internet cafe. They had been scouring social media for 3 hours, searching for Mike, who worked at Joe's Diner in Seattle 5 years ago. "This is hopeless," Vivian groaned, rubbing her eyes. "There are 1,000 Mikes. We don't even know his last name." "He was big," Audrey said, scrolling through an old Facebook page for the diner that hadn't been updated since 2018. "He had a tattoo on his forearm. An anchor." "Great. A cook with an anchor tattoo. That narrows it down to half the population of Seattle," Vivian sarcastically retorted. Suddenly, Audrey's phone buzzed. A text message. It was from Mr. Henderson. Audrey's heart leaped. She opened it quickly. The text was short. "I'm sorry, Audrey. I can't do it. They know about everything. I'm leaving town for a while. Don't look for me. I signed the affidavit for Harrison. I had no choice." Audrey dropped the phone on the desk. The clatter drew stares from the gamers at the next station. "He got to him," Audrey whispered, her voice hollow. "Gareth got to Henderson." He recanted. Vivian snatched the phone and read the text. She swore loudly. "We're dead. Without the notary, the napkin is just a piece of paper. Blackwood will argue it's a forgery, and with Henderson's affidavit supporting them, the judge will throw it out. You'll get nothing. And then the extortion charges will drop." Audrey put her head in her hands. The exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. She had come so close. She had seen the fear in Harrison's eyes. But money had won. Money always won. "Maybe I should just run," Audrey whispered. "Go to Mexico. Start over." "No," Vivian said firmly. She grabbed Audrey's shoulder. "Look at me. You are not running. Harrison Sterling thinks he can buy reality. But he forgot one thing." "What?" "He forgot that I know his passwords." Vivian turned to the computer. She opened a browser and navigated to the internal employee portal for the Sterling household staff, a system Harrison used to manage his maids, drivers, and chefs across his various properties. "What are you doing?" Audrey asked. "Harrison is a creature of habit," Vivian typed furiously. "When he likes something, he buys it. He liked that diner, right? He went there specifically for the food. He liked the milkshakes and the burgers. He said they reminded him of his childhood." "Exactly." Vivian hit enter. "And when the diner closed 3 years ago, where do you think the best cook in Seattle went? Do you think Harrison Sterling would let a good burger flipper go unemployed?" The screen loaded. A list of current household staff for the Sterling estate appeared. Vivian scrolled down. "Gardener Jose, driver Thomas, private chef, weekend residence Michael Kowalski. Vivian clicked on the profile. A photo popped up. A large, bearded man in a chef's coat. On his forearm, clearly visible as he held a spatula, was a faded tattoo of an anchor. "Oh my God," Audrey breathed. "Big Mike." "Harrison hired him." Vivian laughed a manic, triumphant sound. "He hired the witness. He's been cooking Harrison's burgers at his weekend ski lodge in Aspen for 3 years. He's on Harrison's payroll," Audrey said, her hope faltering. "Why would he help us? He works for the Billionaire." "Because," Vivian pointed to a note in the employee file. "Status probation. Reason salary dispute." "He hates Harrison," Audrey realized. "Everyone hates Harrison eventually," Vivian said, standing up. "We don't need to find a ghost, Audrey. We just need to go to Aspen. And we need to get there before Harrison realizes that the man flipping his pancakes holds the key to his destruction." Audrey stood up. The despair was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "To the airport," Audrey said. But as they walked out of the internet cafe, a black SUV rolled slowly past the window. Inside, Gareth Stone was watching. He pressed an earpiece to his ear. "They're on the move," Gareth said quietly. "And they're looking happy. I don't like it." "Follow them," Harrison's voice crackled in his ear. "And finish it." The 72-hour recess was over. The courtroom was packed. Every legal analyst, gossip columnist, and hungry reporter in Los Angeles had squeezed into the gallery. Harrison Sterling sat at the defense table, looking refreshed. He had shaved, slept, and regained his aura of invincibility. In his hand, Jonathan Blackwood held the affidavit signed by a terrified Mr. Henderson, stating the napkin was a drunk joke and legally void. "Your Honor," Blackwood began, his voice booming with unearned confidence, "the defense moves to dismiss the so-called Diner addendum. We have a sworn affidavit from the notary public stating he was coerced into silence initially and that Mr. Sterling was incapacitated at the time of the scribbling. This was a prank, nothing more." Judge Reynolds looked at the affidavit. He looked at the empty seat next to Audrey. Vivian was in the gallery, wearing dark glasses, but Audrey sat alone. "Ms. Jenkins," the judge said, his voice grave, "your witness, Mr. Henderson, has recanted. Without a corroborating witness to prove Mr. Sterling's intent and sobriety, I have no choice but to rule in favor of the original prenuptial agreement." Harrison smirked. He leaned over to Blackwood. "I told you. Money talks." "I have a witness," Audrey said, standing up. "The notary is gone, Audrey," Harrison called out, ignoring decorum. "Give it up." "Not the notary," Audrey said, turning toward the heavy oak doors at the back of the room. "The cook." The doors swung open. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Walking down the aisle wasn't a lawyer in a suit. It was Michael Big Mike Kowalski. He was wearing his best flannel shirt, his beard freshly trimmed and his sleeves rolled up, revealing a faded anchor tattoo on his forearm. Harrison's smirk vanished. He squinted. "Who is that?" "That," Audrey said, her voice ringing clear, "is the man who made your vanilla milkshake that night. And coincidentally, the man you've had working as your private chef in Aspen for the last 3 years." Big Mike took the stand. He didn't look at the lawyers. He looked straight at Harrison. "Mr. Kowalski," the judge asked, "do you recognize the defendant?" "Yeah," Mike grunted. "That's my boss, Mrs. Sterling." "And do you recognize this napkin?" Mike squinted at the evidence bag. "Sure do. Joe's Diner. Rainy Tuesday. Mr. Sterling was bragging to me about how he was smarter than the banks. He asked for a pen. He signed it right in front of me. Then he looked me in the eye and said, "Mike, witness this, I'm betting on myself." "Was he drunk?" Blackwood shouted, trying to intervene. Mike laughed. "Drunk, no. He drank 2 milkshakes and a coffee. He was driving his Aston Martin. He was sober as a judge, just arrogant." The courtroom erupted. Harrison stood up, his face purple. "You're fired, you hear me, Mike? You're fired. I quit," Mike shot back. "And by the way, you treat your staff like garbage." Judge Reynolds slammed his gavel, the sound echoing like a thunderclap. "Order Mr. Sterling, sit down, or I will hold you in contempt." The judge looked at Harrison, then at the napkin, and finally at Audrey. "The testimony of Mr. Kowalski, a current employee of the defendant, is deemed credible. It contradicts the recanted affidavit of the notary. The court finds that the diner addendum meets all criteria for a valid contract. It was signed voluntarily by a sober party with consideration." Reynolds paused. He looked Harrison dead in the eye. "The diner addendum is upheld. Mr. Sterling, per your own handwritten agreement, you have forfeited 50% of your controlling shares and the Kensington estate to your wife." Harrison Sterling slumped into his chair, a man whose empire had just been dismantled by a waitress and a fry cook. Audrey didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She simply packed her tote bag, looked at Vivian in the back row, and nodded. She walked out of the courtroom a billionaire, but more importantly, she walked out free. And just like that, the diner addendum became the most expensive napkin in history. Harrison Sterling lost $2 billion because he treated people like props in his own movie. Audrey didn't keep all the money, though. Rumor has it she started a foundation for legal aid to help women trapped in unfair marriages, and she opened the biggest, best bakery Seattle has ever seen, with Big Mike running the kitchen, of course. It just goes to show. Be careful who you step on your way up, because you might meet them on your way down. Wow, what a ride. I still can't believe Harrison was taken down by his own burger chef. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And I have a question for you. If you were Audrey, would you have taken the money or just walked away to be free? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. I'll see you in the next video.